And yugas go and the god of death is unconcerned looking at them. So he says, survived the passing of unnumbered stars and sheltered still the same immutable orbs. The eyes, the orbs which had seen the birth of the sun had also seen the splitting of the sun, the same eyes, and seen other universes come, other universes go, etc. The two opposed each other with their eyes. First, Savitri and the god of death oppose each other with their eyes. Woman and universal God. One hand, there is this woman, the other, there is the universal God. Around her, piling their void, unbearable loneliness upon her mighty, uncompanioned soul, many inhuman solitudes came close. As Savitri looked at the god of death, she felt that she was being surrounded by a kind of solitariness. If any human being at any time has expressed any kind of solitariness, all this has been collected, as it were, and then piled around Savitri. That's the kind of feeling that she was surrounded by loneliness, by solitariness. As she looked at the god of death, she began to feel this. As it were, the god of death is creating a kind of panicky situation in Savitri. Made her feel, oh, I'm all alone, how can I fight this? So, as she looks at him, she feels that she is being surrounded by piles and piles of loneliness. If anything that ever a human heart had felt lonely any time, all this had now been accumulated and piled around Savitri. Piling their void, unbearable loneliness upon her mighty, uncompanioned soul, many inhuman solitudes came close. Vacant eternities, forbidding hope, laid upon her their huge and lifeless look, and unending emptiness. See the associations that even the very look of the god of death, it's not as if the god of death is doing something to her, but what Sri Aurobindo is describing is the thoughts that occur in Savitri's mind as she sees the god of death. One is utter loneliness, utter helplessness, feeling that you are all alone. The other thing is emptiness, helplessness. This is all empty. All this is bombarding Savitri. It's a psychological warfare also. It is not just a physical, spiritual, it's also psychological. She is being bombarded by these sentiments, these feelings, associations of loneliness. Vacant entities forbidding hope, that is unending and emptiness, laid upon her their huge and lifeless look, and to her ears, silencing earthly sounds, a sad and formidable voice arose, which seemed the whole adverse worlds. And suddenly a voice arises, silencing all other earthly sounds. And what does the voice say? Unclasp, it cried. Unclasp. Unclasp, release. Release what? Thy passionate influence and relax, O slave of nature, changing tool of changeless law, who vainly ridest rebellion to my yoke. Thy elemental grasp, weep and forget. Look at the haughty disdain with which she treats this mere mortal. He says, unclasp, release thy passionate influence and relax. Let him go. He is no more yours. Let him go, that's what he's saying. Relax. O slave of nature. He reminds her, you are slave of nature. He has mistaken Savitri for you and me. He doesn't know what Savitri is. Because she looks very much like you and me, and we are all slaves of nature. She says, you slave of nature, changing tool of changeless law. The law of this world, I have made them, they are changeless. Who vainly rise rebellion to my yoke. I have put this yoke on this earth, on life, and you are like a little worm, like a two-legged worm, you are writhing in protest against my yoke. Relax, he says, thy elemental grasp. Your grasp is so elemental. Don't think you can hold him back. Weep and forget. This is all human beings can do, right? Weep and forget. How long will you weep? Weep and forget. Entomb thy passion in its living grave. If you like, take all your sentiments, take all your unshed tears, unwept tears, etc., and make a tomb for all these in your heart. Let them lie there, and there you can do whatever you like. Entomb thy passion in its living grave. Leave now the once loud spirit's abandoned robe. Pass lonely back to thy vain life on earth. What you are clinging on to, you are clutching on to is the once loud spirit's abandoned robe. The Vasansi Jiranani, all this abandoned robe of a person you once loved, and you want to cling on to that. You leave it, relax your hold on it, pass lonely back to thy vain life on earth. Go back to your lonely life on earth. It ceased. The voice stopped. It ceased. She moved not. Savitri didn't respond in any way. The silence has a great power. Once you open your mouth, you lost your power. Silence. She just keeps quiet, listens to him. And you know what a great come down it is for the god of death? She is not afraid. She is not saying anything. She is not even paying heed to him. She just is looking at him. So, if you are a god of death, you will next time scale down a little bit. You already come down. So, Savitri's technique is this essential mastery. And she doesn't say a thing. It ceased, she moved not. Not only did she not speak, there was no reaction of any sort in her. She was absolutely quiet, still. And it spoke again. But already her remaining quiet and still had its effect. This time, the voice had already come down to a lower pitch. It is not so haughty and so imperious, already scaled down a little bit, lowering its mighty key to human chords. He spoke more in a kind of natural way. Yet a dead cry behind the uttered sounds, echoing all sadness and immortal scorn, mourned like a hunger of far wandering waves. Of course, his voice had come down, but the irony behind it, the kind of disdain, contempt, all this, that had not come down. That was still as strong as before. Yet a dread cry behind the uttered sounds, echoing all sadness and immortal scorn, mourned like a hunger of far wandering waves. Wilt thou forever keep thy passionate hold, thyself a creature doomed like him to pass, denying his soul death's calm and silent rest? Will you not? Will you keep your hold for him forever? It's very strange, isn't it? What he says is true. Because how long will Savitri be able to hold on to Satyavan, even if she could? Because if not today, 2 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, 15 years later, Savitri has to go the same way. Right? You don't want the dead man to go. You want the dead man, dead person to be with you, but how long will you be here? So he says, how long do you want to keep him? How long can you keep him? Don't you know you are also a wayfarer on the same route? Today it is Satyavan's turn, tomorrow it is your turn. Are you eternal here on earth that you want to keep him for yourself? Wilt thou forever keep thy passionate hold, thyself a creature doomed like him to pass? It's only a question of time. Somebody gets out at this station, somebody gets off at the next station. That's about all. Between these two stations, if there is good bhelpuri, etc., you had the opportunity of tasting it. That's about all. You can't just go on and on in this journey. You have to get off. So how long can you keep him? Even if suppose I say, all right, Savitri, I make an exception. You can keep Satyavan. How long? Thyself a creature doomed like him to pass, denying his soul death's calm and silent rest. You know, Satyavan, what I have to offer to Satyavan? Rest and calm. All the fret and fever of life that one has to go through, all this is now past. I will give him peace and quiet. Even that you want to deny to him? Don't you think he has suffered enough by being here on earth? It's his time now to rest for a while. Wilt thou forever keep thy passionate hold, thyself a creature doomed like him to pass, denying his soul death's calm and silent rest? Relax thy grasp. His body is earth's and thine. His body you take away and do what you like with it. I don't care. His spirit now belongs to a greater power. I'm not going to take away his body. That is yours. You are free to take it. But his spirit, you see what is happening was Savitri, because of his intense love, was able, as it were, to hold an impediment. Satyavan's soul, as it were, could not cross this. He was able to dam, as it were, his passage. And Yama is saying, please let him go, because he can't get back into the body. He can't come with me. He is left. He has nothing. He has no body. You see, body, human body, is a great shelter. It's a great protection. And whatever else human body may be, it also protects you from various kinds of things. Now he can't go back into the body. And I would have taken him and taken him to a place of rest where he could have been at ease. You are not allowing that, and therefore he says, relax thy grasp. This body is earth's and thine. His spirit now belongs to a greater power. Woman, thy husband suffers. You know what is happening to him? He suffers. He can't go back. He can't come here. He's suffering. Savitri drew back her heart's force that clasped his body still, where from her lap renounced on the smooth grass softly it lay. Although the body was lying softly on the grass beside her, Savitri's heart, as it were, Savitri's love, had the custody of the soul. Unless she releases it, the god of death, of course he could have forced it to come, that's a different matter. But he doesn't want to do that, so he tries to convince Savitri, it is in your interest, it is in Satyavan's interest that you release the hold on Satyavan's soul. And Savitri drew back at that point. Her heart's force, whatever force of love that Savitri had exercised on Satyavan's soul, that clasped his body still, where from her lap pronounced on the smooth grass, softly it lay. And still the human touch is not lost. He says, as often before in sleep, when from their couch she rose in the white dawn. Very often, during the last 1 year where they have lived together, and early in the morning she had to get up before Satyavan because she had the daily chores to attend to. So very often before she got up, she was reluctant to get up because Satyavan was still lying there. So she remembers all those early mornings when she had to leave Satyavan and get up. But this is a different getting up. This is a getting up to which she can't go back to. But she remembers this. She says, as often before in sleep, when from their couch she rose in the white dawn, called by her daily tasks, now too, as if called. Now also she is called, but not by daily tasks, but by the challenge posed before her by the god of death, where he says, his spirit belongs to me, the body belongs to you, you can take the body. Like one who drops his mantle for a race and waits the signal, motionlessly swift. It's a beautiful way of describing. Savitri is now getting ready. What does she do before she gets ready? Like somebody who is joining the race, removes the mantle, as it were, all encumbrances of her body, makes herself quite, easy, and waiting, motionlessly swift. How can you be motionlessly swift? It's motionless, but there is such concentration in its motionless. Before that, the starting point of 100 meters race, have you seen the athletes? They're all there motionlessly swift. It's not as if they start their movement after they hear the whistle. Then by the time you hear it, the chaps have already reached the 100 meters mark. You have to be there, except that you are not moving. The motion has already started. But that's a kind of motionlessly swift. So she rose and stood gathered in lonely strength, like one who drops his mantle for a race and waits the signal, motionlessly swift. She knew not to what course. See, most people know this is the track I have to run along. 100 meters, 200 meters, 400 meters, 800 meters. But Savitri didn't know what the race track is going to be on which she will have to run. She is all ready, but she doesn't know which way it is going to be. She knew not to what course. Her spirit, above on the crypt summit of her secret form, like one left sentinel on a mountain crest, a fiery-footed splendor, puissant winged, watched flaming silent, with her voiceless soul like a still sail upon a windless sea. Aurobindo also pointing out that there was a part of Savitri which was quietly just observing, like a still sail on a windless sea. A still sail on a windless sea. What is this? On the crypt summit of her secret form, on the top of her secret form, like one left sentinel on a mountain crest, like a sentinel, somebody who keeps watch over things, but from the top of a hill. So on the top of her being, there was a presence who was watching everything, a fiery-footed splendor, puissant winged. This sentinel, this consciousness of us, was also fiery footed. He was also capable of fast movement, also puissant wing. There was plenty of power in the wings. Watched flaming silent. Watched flaming with aspiration, flaming with expectation of activity, flaming silent with her voiceless soul, like a still sail upon a windless sea. She was just watching, observing. She didn't know exactly how to act, how to react to what the god of death is saying. She didn't know what kind of challenges he is going to throw at her. So she, part of her being, was just quietly watching. White, passionless it rode, an anchored might, waiting what far-reaching impulse should arise out of the eternal depths and cast its surge. Didn't know from where the challenge is going to come, what she will have to do, in which direction she will have to surge forth. She didn't know anything at that point still at all. She was not very clear, basically, how to react and what she will have to do. She was prepared to act, but exactly how, she didn't know at this point. Then Death the King leaned boundless down, as leans night over tired lands. Death leaned down and picked up, as it were, the soul of Satyavan in his noose. And he describes that as the night bends down, bends over, then Death the King leaned boundless down, as leans night over tired lands, when evening pales and fading gleams break down the horizon's walls, nor yet the dark grows mystic with the moon. It's not yet dark enough for the mystic moon to come. In this twilight, it's like twilight, when death kind of leaned over Satyavan's soul, the dim and awful Godhead rose erect. He had done his job, he had picked up Satyavan's spirit from his brief stooping to his touch on earth, and like a dream that wakes out of a dream. Now, something interesting, surprising happens, like a dream coming out of a dream. How do you know a dream out of a dream? Because a new form emerges from that body. This is the subtle body of Satyavan, subtle vital of Satyavan. When a physical body, the gross body is left back, it's not just the soul. There is plenty of writing in the mother about what actually happens. But Satyavan is no ordinary human being. So Satyavan, even if Satyavan dies, he would not follow the path that ordinary human beings follow. Satyavan is already somebody whose being is entirely integrated, his psychic is in the front. So those people have a special way of going. And so whatever other people's, mother has said a great deal about what happens when somebody dies, what are the various points or what are the various stations where the soul rests, and what happens, and all this idea of a hell and heaven, etc. She has spoken about these things. But I am not sure many of these things apply to Satyavan, because Satyavan is not an ordinary human being. It's not the death of an ordinary human being. And so somehow his soul will not follow the ordinary path. And but the fact remains that out of the dead Satyavan's body, kind of a form emerges, luminous Satyavan arises. That's what is described. From his brief stooping to his touch on earth, and like a dream that wakes out of a dream, forsaking the poor mold of that dead clay, another luminous Satyavan arose. A luminous body of Satyavan arises from his physical body, starting upright from the recumbent earth, as if someone over viewless border stepped, emerging on the edge of unseen worlds, as if somebody had just come from another part of the world and stepping out. So a new body, a new form of Satyavan steps out. In the earth's day, this silent marvel stood. Now Satyavan's new spirit, new form is described as the silent marvel. In the earth's day, the silent marvel stood between the mortal woman and the god. On the one side, Savitri, another side, the god of death, and between these two, this luminous form of Satyavan. Such seemed he as if one departed came, wearing the light of a celestial shape, splendidly alien to the mortal air. The shape that Satyavan was now wearing was splendidly alien to anything human, and is beautifully described. Savitri, very fondly, as it were, her senses rest on this new shape. Looks like Satyavan but doesn't feel like Satyavan, because the Satyavan that Savitri had known was the Satyavan in an earthly body. That body has been left behind. This is a different kind of a body. So he says, the mind sought things long loved and fell back foiled. Whose mind is it? Savitri's mind. Savitri's mind goes back and, oh, Satyavan here, but doesn't feel like Satyavan. Looks like Satyavan, the new form, but doesn't feel like Satyavan. From unfamiliar hues, beheld, yet longed by the sweet radiant form unsatisfied. Savitri feels totally unsatisfied, the reactions to this new body, incredulous of its too bright hints of heaven. It's too bright to be an earthly body, too strange the brilliant phantasm to life's clasp, desiring the warm creations of the earth, reared in the ardor of material suns. You and I are used to earthly beings, the earthly ardor, the earthly warmth. All that was missing. And so this was a kind of ethereal Satyavan. Satyavan, luminous, etc. But there were hands, there were eyes, but you touched the hand, the human warmth was missing. It's a totally different kind of Satyavan. So Savitri is baffled. This reared in the ardor of material suns, the senses seized in vain a glorious shade. It was a glorious shadow. Only the spirit knew the spirit still. Savitri's spirit could recognize the spirit in this new Satyavan, and the heart divined the old loved heart, though changed. The heart could recognize this is the heart of the man I had loved, and the spirit could recognize that this is Satyavan's spirit. But everything else that you and I look for in the human body, Savitri also wanted to look for those things, and all those didn't return to her the normal responses she was accustomed to. Between two realms he stood, not wavering, but fixed in quiet, strong expectancy, like one who sightless listens for a command. This is a very beautiful 3 lines. Satyavan now has no volition of his own. So he compares him to a blind man who is all ready to move, but doesn't know which way to go, so waits for a command. So Satyavan is like that, all attention, waiting to get some guidance, some direction, which way to move. So, between two realms he stood, not wavering. It's not as if he was wavering, but fixed in quiet, strong expectancy, like one who sightless, as if you are blind, listens for a command. So were they immobile on that earthly field. They were still here on earth. Powers not of earth, though one in human clay. In fact, all these 3, Savitri, now Satyavan, and the god of death, they were standing on earth, but they were not all powers of this earth. Savitri is the supreme mother herself in the human form. Satyavan at one time was a human being, but no more a human being because he has cast shed his earthly body, and God of death was never a human being. So he says, like one, powers not of earth. They were not earthly powers, neither Satyavan, nor Savitri, nor God of death, but one of them, though one in human clay. And who was this? Savitri. Savitri was the only one who still had the human form. On either side of the two spirits strove. Silence battled with silence, vast with vast. One side Savitri, the other side the god of death. Silence battles with silence, vast with vast. But now the impulse of the path was felt. Now the impulse to move, impulse of the path was felt. Moving from the silence that supports the stars to touch the confines of the visible world. They now wanted to move to the end of the visible world. Luminous, he moved away. First, for some reason, Satyavan is leading the caravan. He is the luminous form of Satyavan in the front. Behind him, death went slowly with his noiseless tread. When he walks, there was no noise, noiseless tread. There are various ideas about gods. Gods are supposed to be those people who never close their eyelids. They always keep their eyes open, never close their eyelids. They don't have to. Similarly, when they walk, there are no footsteps. So when gods knock at your door, don't expect any footsteps. They don't make any, they don't have. They very quietly come and knock at your door. Went slowly with his noiseless tread, as seen in dream-built fields, a shadowy herdsman glides behind some wanderer from his voiceless herds. He says the death was like a shepherd in a dream, gliding along. So death was gliding along, although he was behind Satyavan, he was in fact the shepherd. It was he who was deciding which way to go. But it was like a dream-built fields, a shadowy herdsman glides behind some wanderer from his voiceless herds, and Savitri moved behind eternal death. So, Satyavan in the front, god of death following him, and following the god of death, Savitri. This was the threesome that had now started moving. Her mortal pace was equaled with the gods. And however fast the god of death went, Savitri was able to match that speed. Savitri moved behind eternal death. Her mortal space was equaled with the gods. Wordless she travelled in her lover's steps. Wherever Satyavan steps, she also put her steps in those steps, planting her human feet where he had trod into the perilous silences beyond. So the journey now moves beyond the boundaries of this earth into the perilous beyond. I think we'll stop here because some people were 7. This is the third section of Canto 1, Book 9, the confrontation between Savitri and the god of death has begun. And in the first section we saw the great transformation that comes over Savitri and how she is now in possession of herself, in possession of her highest self, and therefore is able to deal with the god of death no matter what web of terror he spreads all around her. And as you know, his attitude is one of contempt, disdain. You two-legged worm, you have to last here at my mercy, and when I so desire, your life will be extinguished. Now, this is the very first, as you have told you, what Sri Aurobindo does in these 100 pages of the dialogue between the god of death and Savitri. He unveils, as it were, one by one, the various facets, the various faces of the god of death. And one by one, just as we have to discover ourselves, that's basically what yoga is all about. The part of the yoga also consists of discovering the reality behind death. Death is a mask, death is a fiction. But, however, in terms of human psychology, in the way we dwell upon death, it's a terror against which we feel totally helpless. And that's the first phase that's now being revealed to us, and the god of death again and again dismisses Savitri as somebody of no consequence at all. It's not just Savitri, that is his evaluation of all of us human beings. And so Savitri now rebuffs all this and asserts herself. And that's how, as we go through this canto and the next and the remaining 4 cantos, etc., until death is challenged to transcend himself. Death is challenged to be his real self. Death himself is in many ways a formation of a much higher power. As I told you, in the Vedas, Yama is another name for the supreme divine. So just as you have Brahma, you have Vishnu and so on, Yama also is the name of the divine. And each one of these powers are powers which function to control this creation. Yama also has that power. But Yama has to be reminded, Yama has to be awakened. And so Savitri does this job as we go along, but now we are in the very early days, and so we have just seen the first phase of it. Now we move on to the second. Now remember, they all are still in that forest, still on earth. We have seen from Satyavan's prone body lying on the grass, a luminous Satyavan has arisen, and these threesome are now proceeding. Satyavan's luminous form in the front, followed by the god of death. So the god of death is like a shepherd. So the sheep follow whatever direction the shepherd has in mind. So automatically Satyavan's being follows the direction the death has in mind, and Savitri perforce has to follow these two people. That's what we saw. Now, this is the third part, third section of this canto, when they leave this earth and go into the higher realms. There are a number of questions here one need to be clear about, because as I told you, Satyavan is not an ordinary mortal being. Satyavan is an exceptionally evolved person, and the path that an ordinary soul follows after death and the path a very highly evolved person follows are not the same. So all this has to be borne in mind, and so the mother has said a few things about these things. Wherever I find it necessary, I will read out these things so that you have in your mind a clearer picture of what actually happens and where these people are, etc. At first, in a blind stress of woods, she moved with strange inhuman paces on the soil, journeying as if upon an unseen road. Now that the journey has started, the entire scene looks unfamiliar to Savitri, and a stress of woods she moved. Wood all around her, the forest all around her, she is moving with strange inhuman paces on the soil, and she sees on the soil strange inhuman paces, because these are the footprints left by the god of death, and before her So this is the strange inhuman spaces on the soil, journeying as if upon an unseen road. Feels that she is traveling on a road she had never seen before. Around her, on the green and imaged earth, the flickering screen of forests ringed her steps. Its thick, luxurious obstacle of boughs besieged her body, pressing dimly through in a rich realm of whispers palpable, and all the murmurous beauty of the leaves rippled around her like an emerald robe. As I read this, I get the imagination that now they are, they are taking off, as it were. The upward movement has begun. And so, as they are moving upwards, it's not a vertical, I guess, it's not a vertical movement. I guess it is like they take off like that. During the first phase, therefore, they are going through these rich foliage of trees all around. Remember, it's a forest. So, for quite a height, there are these trees and there are leaves and so on, and they are going up. So, around her on the green and imaged earth, the flickering screen of forests ringed her steps. All around her steps, there were this flickering screen of forests, the dense foliage, the thick leaves of the forest, all these around her legs. Its thick, luxurious obstacle of boughs besieged her body, pressing dimly through. And then, as they were advancing, as they were proceeding, all the branches of the tree which had grown in a thick cluster become some kind of an obstacle, and she has to make her way through all these obstacles. In a rich realm of whispers palpable, and the body brushes against these branches, against these leaves. Even otherwise, is always the play of wind, and therefore this whisper of between in the trees, and all the murmurous beauty of the leaves rippled around her like an emerald robe. As it were, she was wearing an emerald green robe. That's what it looked like as she was going. But more and more of this grew an alien sound. Gradually, slowly, they were coming to a region where they had just crossed the boundary of these trees and leaves. And her old intimate body seemed to her a burden which her being remotely bore. It looked to her, her body, she was still in her body, was not very closely, she was not very close to the body. It looked as if it's a kind of remote thing that she was wearing. Not something very compact, but felt it was a remote burden. It was a burden that she was wearing. Later on, you will see there comes a point when she has to leave her physical body and move forward in a subtle body. Right now, she is still in her body, but she feels this body is a burden. It's a kind of a burden which her being remotely bore. Herself lived far in some uplifted scene, where to the trance-claimed vision of pursuit, soul presences in a high spaceless dream, the luminous spirit glided stilly on, and the great shadow traveled vague behind. This caravan was moving. In the front, there was the luminous spirit glided stilly on. The luminous spirit being that of Satyavan, and the great shadow is death, god of death, and the great shadow traveled vague behind. The god of death is always characterized by terms like vague, shadowy, and so on. And he is following him. Herself lived, she became aware of living in some far uplifted scene. She is now feeling that she is no more on earth, but in some uplifted, far uplifted scene, where to the trance-claimed vision of pursuit, and she was not in the, it's not absolutely in the waking consciousness, a certain kind of trance had already overtaken her, and all this was happening to her. This experience was coming to her as she went into a kind of a trance, where to the trance-claimed vision of pursuit, soul presences in a high spaceless dream. It looked as if she is seeing a dream. It's not as if it's a tangible, three-dimensional reality that you and I see with our senses. The whole scene has a dream-like quality, and this dream is taking place somewhere high above. And what did he see in this dream? The luminous spirit glided stilly on, and the great shadow traveled vague behind, still with an amorous crowd of seeking hands, softly entreated by their old desires. Her senses felt earth's close and gentle air cling round them, and in troubled branches knew uncertain treadings of a faint foot wind. As she was crossing, as it were, the atmosphere of this earth, her senses were besieged by old associations. Human senses have a way of reacting to things and so on. Now she is going to enter a world where the senses will not be functioning in the normal way. But before that, Savitri's senses felt earth's close and gentler higher sphere. That's what is described. Still with an amorous crowd of seeking hands, softly entreated by their old desires. Her senses felt earth's close and gentle air cling round them, and in troubled branches knew uncertain treadings of a faint foot wind. It looked as if there was a faint wind blowing through the branches. Similarly, the faint wind of sense attraction blew through her senses. She bore dim fragrances, far callings touched, the wild bird's voice and its winged rustle came, as if a sigh from some forgotten world. Her ears still hear the distant cry of the bird, they can still, the rustle of the bird's wings, all this she still sees, but it's as if it comes from a forgotten world, the world that she has left behind, and she is moving on to another world. Earth stood aloof, yet near. Round her it wove its sweetness and its greenness and delight, its brilliant suave of well-loved vivid hues, sunlight arriving to its golden noon, and the blue heavens and the caressing soil. The earth stood aloof yet near. Round it wove its sweetness and its greenness and delight. Savitri felt the earth was kind of spreading her magic and her charm all around her, kind of beseeching her, please don't leave us, don't leave us, stay with us. And its brilliant suave of well-loved vivid hues, sunlight arriving to its golden noon, and the blue heavens and the caressing soil. The ancient mother offered to her child her simple word of kind, familiar things. But now, as if the body, sensuous-souled, curbing the godhead of her infinite walk, had freed those spirits to their grander road, across some boundaries intangible bar, the silent God grew mighty and remote in other spaces, and the soul she loved lost its consenting nearness to her life. Suddenly she felt if she continued to respond to the call of the earth, to the experience of the earth, very soon she will lose track of Satyavan and the god of death. So she had to make up her mind and once for all rest herself, pull herself away from earth and its attractions, etc., and concentrate on these two people who were ahead of her and were moving. Because if she is still, part of her being is still on earth and earth's attraction, earth's beauty, etc., she will lose track of the people she is following. She is following these two people. First Satyavan and the god of death follow up behind him, and Savitri behind these two. Now, if she is not focused, as if like you're chasing a car, when you're chasing a car, you can't afford to think of other things, you can't afford to listen to music, you have to, keep your mind focused. So Savitri felt that now, if she has to be anywhere close to them, she has to do a number of things. And as long as she wears her human body, it's only natural that the earth and its call and its delights, etc., will still be a hindrance. So, what she does, very soon you will see, she drops the human body. But here, suddenly finds the god of death has moved away, and before him Satyavan, they have gone far away, they are distant, and for a while she doesn't know where they have gone. That kind of a panic overtakes her. But now, as if the body's sensuous hold, curbing the godhead of her infinite walk. The the capacity to walk with the God of death and Yama has suddenly been hampered because of the pull of the earth, had freed those spirits to their grander road. And because Satyavan and the God of death did not have earthly bodies to carry, they were fleet of foot, they were very fast, they could move easily and smoothly, but Savitri could not because, Savitri could not because she still had the earthly body. Across some boundaries intangible bar, the silent God grew mighty and remote in other spaces. The God of death suddenly became remote and looked very grand, very big, and the soul she loved, that is Satyavan, lost its consenting nearness to her life. And Satyavan, although there was god of death standing between her and Satyavan, she always felt she was very close, following him very closely. Suddenly that distance also increased, and the god of death had gone much far ahead, and Satyavan even in front of him, and she was left behind, and she felt the body was holding her back. Into a deep and unfamiliar air, enormous, windless, without stir or sound, they seem to enlarge away, drawn by some wide, pale distance from the warm control of earth, and her grown far. Now they would escape as she is watching. The god of death was looking huger and huger, and the distance between them, between Savitri and these two other people was not, I don't know whether people or what, there is no such common name, beings, let us say, was increasing. And she felt for a while, now, they would escape, that she would lose, track of them, and she would be just left behind in this wilderness. So, into a deep and unfamiliar air, enormous, the region is described, it is very vast, enormous, windless, without stir or sound. They seem to enlarge away. They kind of seem to get bigger and bigger and bigger and more remote, drawn by some wide, pale distance from the warm control of earth, and her grown far. And she has grown far from them, far away from them. Now they would escape. She has a momentary feeling that they probably would escape, and she won't know where they have gone. Mid the plunge of heaven surrounded rocks, so in a terror and a wrath divine, from her airy streams against the ascending death, indignant at its couching point of steel, a fierce she-eagle threatened in her brood, born on a rush of puissance and a cry, outwinging like a mass of golden fire. Now Savitri is being described to a she-eagle. What kind of a she-eagle? A she-eagle from her airy streams against the ascending death. Airy is a kind of a nest of a bird which is built very high up in the air. And there the bird is brooding over the little ones. Then suddenly some form of death, some comes, ascending death, comes to attack this brood. At that time, this she-eagle threatened in her brood just rushes back. So just as the she-eagle rushes back to protect her brood, Savitri similarly now rushed outwinging like a mass of golden fire out of the rocky expanses of heaven, out mid the plunge of heaven-surrounded rocks. She felt herself that she was in a region where there were rocks of all kinds. Out of that region, she rose like a mass of golden fire, carried by an upsurge of fear and anger. Fear that she might lose Satyavan forever and ever. Anger that probably the death, god of death, is playing a trick on her. So like fear and anger, exactly like what? Exactly like a bird, like a she-eagle, who feels that her nest up there is being threatened by death, and so to protect her brood, the little ones, she just rushes. Savitri rushed like that, like a mass of golden fire, out mid the plunge of heaven-surrounded rocks. So in a terror and a wrath divine, she was terrorized, and she had a wrath divine, an anger, divine anger. From her airy streams against the ascending death, indignant at its crouching point of steel, just as the nest is attacked by some point of steel, somebody is trying to upset the nest, tear the nest, etc. Just at that moment, the mother eagle flies directly back, exactly with that passion. Savitri now rose, a fierce she-eagle threatened in her brood, born a rush of puissance and a cry, outwinging like a mass of golden fire. So on a spirit's flaming outrush borne, she crossed the borders of dividing sense, like pale discarded sheets dropped dully down, her mortal members fell back from her soul. At this moment, she kind of casts away, drops back her physical body, the human body, and becomes to that extent free. Now, this is only possible in a trance. So she has to leave behind this body and get into her subtle body. And there are various kinds of sheaths, one more subtle than another. And those who have mastered the art of the occult, you can do that. Leave your body there. I mean, this is possible with training. You can do that every night, as it were, and visit whoever you want to visit. You can go around and see who is doing what. And this is a very common occult thing. But here, what is happening is Savitri is leaving her mortal body behind and gets into her subtle body. And with this subtle body, she is now pursuing, following these people. That is described here. So on a spirit's flaming outrush borne, she crossed the borders of dividing sense, like pale discarded sheaths dropped dully down, her mortal members fell back from her soul. All the mortal members of her body fell back from her soul. A moment of a secret body sleep. Now there is a momentary loss of consciousness as she gets into this trance. A moment of secret body sleep. Her trance knew not of sun or earth or world. And in this trance, she lost track of sun and earth and everything. Thought, time and death were absent from her grasp. She knew not self. Forgotten was Savitri. Even Savitri was forgotten in this trance. So she went into this momentary loss of consciousness, went into this trance. All was the violent ocean of a will. And what is it that filled her trance? The single-minded force that I must not leave Satyavan. No matter what it is, Satyavan is the one thing she doesn't want to leave. I mean, Satyavan is not just a part of her surface mind. Satyavan is not just an emotional matter to her. Even when she is in a trance, as you can see, when she has lost track of everything, the sun, the earth and everything, and she even forgets that she is Savitri, the one thing that fills her trance is this presence of Satyavan. Now, where is Satyavan? How do I possess him? That's the kind of force with which she is following him. All was the violent ocean of a will, were lived captive to an immense caress, possessed in a supreme identity, her aim, joy, origin, Satyavan alone. Now, to be able to love somebody like this is not human love. I mean, this is impossible. This most of us we can't do this. This can only happen as Satyavan and Savitri are one consciousness. If they have achieved a complete identity of consciousness, then only this can happen. So Savitri is going through a stage where she has even forgotten the Savitri consciousness, she hasn't forgotten the Satyavan consciousness. So even her little trance, this trance she is going through, is now full. Her all was the violent ocean of her will. This dynamic will of hers exerts itself where lived captive to an immense caress. Her will was extending an immense caress in which was held, possessed in a supreme identity. Supreme identity. Her aim, joy, origin, Satyavan alone. Now, this kind of an identity is not, as I said, this can only come through a yoga. It's not something you can just get, however sensitive you are, however romantic you are, etc., etc. The kind of identity of consciousness. Her sovereign prisoned in her being's core. Satyavan was the sovereign, prisoned in her being's core. He beat there like a rhythmic heart. Satyavan was the heartbeat, like a rhythmic heart. This is not just poetry for Savitri. This is more or less reality. He beat there like a rhythmic heart. Herself. Why did this happen? Because he was herself. Her sovereign prison in her being's core. He beat there like a rhythmic heart, herself, but different still. See, there is a identity and there is also difference. If there is no difference, there is no love. You see, if you have become one, where is the love? Who is the lover and who is the beloved? So there has to be an identity and yet a difference. And so that kind of a difference remains, and therefore she says they become one, they become identified, and yet there was this slight difference as an occasion. It's like, the Indian poets in many Indian languages have said, I don't want to be the sugar. If you have become the sugar, then you can't enjoy the sugar anymore. So you have to have some difference so that you can forever and ever keep tasting the sweetness of the sugar. Has to be this separation. And that separation had remained. That's what he says. Her sovereign prisoned in her being's core, he beat there like a rhythmic heart, herself, but different still. One loved, enveloped, clasped, a treasure saved from the collapse of space. Everything has collapsed. Everything is vanishing. The one thing that she would like to save is Satyavan. And that's why she is now after her, and that's why she is so angry when suddenly finds the god of death getting the better of her and then trying to snatch away Satyavan, as it were, and they are lost in the distance and she is left behind. Around him, nameless, infinite, she surged. She surged, her entire being, as it were, surged towards him. Around him, nameless, infinite, she surged. Her spirit fulfilled in his spirit, rich with all time, as if love's deathless moment had been found, a pearl within eternity's white shell. As if love's deathless moment had been found. That is, it's very strange. In death, she found this deathless moment, and where a pearl within eternity's white shell. Love the pearl of love within the pure shell of eternity. That's what Savitri now finds even in the experience of death. Of course, it's not her death, but Satyavan's. Then, cut out of the engulfing sea of trance, her mind rose drenched to light, streaming with hues of vision, and awake once more to time, returned to shape the lineament of things, and live in borders of the seen and known. Savitri's mind now wakes up from this trance. This was a trance. We talked about this in line 279, a moment of a secret body sleep. From then on, the next 10, 12 lines describe this trance. And now she is coming out of the trance. Then out of the engulfing sea of trance, her mind rose, drenched to light, streaming with hues. Now when she recovers from this trance, her mind is suffused with the light of her vision, that Satyavan is hers, nothing can separate him from her, nothing can take him away from her, a new kind of confidence, suffused the light of her vision, return to shape the lineaments of things and live in borders of the seen and known. Once again, she has come back to the tangible world. Onward, the three still moved in her soul scene. Onward, the three still moved in her soul scene. Now here the poet has a problem. How do you describe the scene? The god of death, Savitri and Satyavan's spirit are moving. Where are they moving? Does it have a geographical location? What is the longitude and latitude of that place? What is the temperature of that place? Where is it? Is it purely an imagination? This is the one difficulty about writing experiences of this kind. These are experiences, but in order to be able to communicate, you have to give some leading, as it were, some lead to the receiving mind. So the poet is trying, and now he's saying, outward the three still moved in her soul scene. This is an experience of her soul. It's a kind of soul scene. That's where they were moving. So don't look for outside, for these things outside. Everything is looking soul scene. In one sense, this is true of all literature. I don't think there ever was a person called Hamlet. I don't think there ever was a person called any of these. There never was, there never will be. These are all people moved on the soul scene of Shakespeare. And he had just transferred them into black marks on white paper so that the soul scene is recreated for us. That's the business of literature. And so, everything ultimately, all great literature, all great poetry, everything is taking place in the soul scene of the artist. But if the experience is very deep of an uncommon kind, then it becomes difficult for an ordinary reader to imagine it, to go back to it. That's the problem of spiritual poetry. Spiritual poetry is not mystical poetry. Spiritual poetry is not religious poetry or moral poetry. In fact, English has very little spiritual poetry except snatches of lines from Wordsworth and Shelley and Keats. I'm not saying they don't have this at all, but they do not have long stretches of spiritual poetry. There are a lot of mystical poetry. There is Blake, etc., etc. They have religious poetry in plenty. Moral poetry, of course, keeps being produced. Spiritual poetry is a different kind, and there are no categories for spiritual poetry. Even in India, they always used to say that the aesthetics that we have, the Sanskrit aesthetics that we have, which gives you categories to describe Kalidas and Bhavabhuti, etc., when they come to the Gita and the Vedas, they say this is something we can't handle, we can't deal with. They know proper aesthetics. Now this was all right. What Sri Aurobindo is now trying to say, this kind of spiritual poetry is going to be more and more a common man's reading in the next stage. The subjective age is coming. The age of reason we have gone, we're just leaving behind, and the new subjective age is coming. And the poetry now is going to be more subjective, more and more spiritual in some cases. And so we need now to develop an aesthetics appropriate to this kind of spiritual poetry, and that is not yet available. And any attempt to take the old measuring yardsticks and try to measure poetry of this kind is bound to fail miserably. A new kind of poetry has to create its own yardsticks, and this is some work that has to be done in the future. In future poetry, Sri Aurobindo has given an outline of the kind of aesthetics that is necessary for spiritual poetry, and of course he has sketched what is over mental poetry and etc. And he said that this poetry is not unknown to other languages. He has pointed out lines from a great British English poets which he thinks are lines from over mental poetry. But as I said, they are little snatches, and the critical canon is not made or built for poetry of that kind. And so this is a new kind of thing that is happening, and as I said, since there is no such framework, we have to limp along, do the best we can. But what I am trying to point out is, as we saw in book 2, mainly when Ashupati's experience of the various worlds of consciousness was being described, we did not know where we are. This is an uncommon kind of experience, and here too we have an experience of a different kind. So here we are in this seeing things that were happening in Savitri's soul scene. As if pacing through fragments of a dream, she seemed to travel on, a visioned shape, imagining other musers like herself, by them imagined in their lonely sleep. This is making it so abstract, it becomes difficult sometimes for us to follow where we are. As if pacing through fragments of a dream. The best way to describe it, where are they moving? They were moving in fragments of dream. It was Savitri's dream. Is it Savitri's dream? Yes, it is Savitri's dream, but Savitri as seen by somebody else in his dream. So it's a kind of dream in a dream in a dream. What he's trying to say, this is so unlike the real world that you and I experience. So it is this distancing that he wants to achieve through this device. So he says, as if pacing through fragments of a dream, she seemed to travel on, a visioned shape, imagining other musers like herself, by them imagined in their lonely sleep, ungrasped, unreal, yet familiar, old, like clefts of unsubstantial memory, scenes often traversed, never lived in, fled past her unheeding to forgotten goals. As she goes through this, fragments of various memories that she had seen, life she had lived, come back to her. In a voiceless regions they were travelers, alone in a new world where souls were not, but only living moods. This is a world where there were no souls, but only living moods. A strange, hushed, weird country was around them. Strange, far skies above, a doubting space where dreaming objects lived. Within themselves, their one unchanged idea. How weird was the place? It was a very weird place. Weird were the grasses, weird the tireless plains, treeless plains. Weird ran the road, which like fear hastening towards that of which it has most terror. This whole thing was very weird. There are treeless plains which were weird. Everything was weird. And weird ran the road. How did the road run? Weird ran the road, which like fear, hastening towards that of which it has most terror. If your mind has terror of something, the mind tends more and more to go in that direction instead of avoiding it more and more. That's the reason why all these movies about ghosts and all these funny movies that come late at night are very popular. There's some kind of experience, some kind of weird thing. What we hear, what we fear, there is something there in us. That seeks that experience. So the roads here look like those roads where fear runs not away but towards what it fears most. Past phantasmal between pillared conscious rocks, somber and high, gates brooding, whose stone thoughts lost their huge sense beyond in giant night. Now he very often tries to describe the scene in terms of, you know, later on, earlier on when we were talking about Savitri's experience, remember the experience was described as if she was going through a temple where various statues were there, various forces were carved there as statues and so on. Similarly here, she is now entering a kind of abysm of the inconscient, and it was guarded by gates, and the gates are being described, enigma of the inconscient sculptural sleep. These brooding gates, they are the description of gates, symbols of the approach to darkness old, and monuments of our titanic reign, opening to depths like dumb appalling jaws that wait a traveller down a haunted path, attracted to a mystery that slays. They watched across her road, cruel and still, sentinels they stood of dumb necessity, mute heads of vigilant and sullen gloom, carved muzzle of a dim, enormous world. Let me assure you that these descriptions which frighten you and terrify you, we don't have to go on and go on very long. Now suddenly the god of death starts speaking to Savitri, and once he starts speaking to Savitri, he begins to make a lot more sense to us than these descriptions. These descriptions are difficult. As I told you, this is a description of these brooding gates, which he describes as a riddle of the sculptural sleep of the inconscient, signifying approaches to the ancient darkness and monuments of the titanic reign of the inconscient, opening to abysses like fearful jaws, waiting for a traveller on a haunted path. He describes the gates through which Savitri is now made to pass as she goes into the inconscient. Then to the chill, sere, heavy line arrived, where his feet touched the shadowy march's brink. Turning arrested, luminous Satyavan looked back with his wonderful eyes at Savitri. Savitri probably wouldn't have, at this point, if you were going through these gates, described here, terrible gates, she almost was losing heart, as it were, but suddenly Satyavan looked back towards her. And that look, she doesn't mind another bout of this darkness. She can follow. So he says, then immediately to the chill, sere, heavy line arrived, where his feet touched the shadowy march's brink. I think Satyavan's spirit had slight doubt whether Savitri has come so far. Will she be able to come beyond this line? Will she be able to enter the gates of the inconscient? Poor Savitri, I am not in a position to help her. See, you can't help Savitri. He can't help Savitri anymore. So he kind of sympathetically turns back towards her, looked back with his wonderful eyes at Savitri. But this, the god of death does not tolerate. He doesn't tolerate any communication between Savitri and Satyavan. He says, but death pealed forth his vast abysmal cry. O mortal, turn back to that transient kind. Why are you wasting your time, my time, everybody's time? turn back to thy transient kind. Aspire not to accompany death to his home. Don't try to accompany me to where I come from, as if thy breath could live where time must die. I live in a world which is beyond time. Time has, only where time dies, my world begins. So how can you, a transient creature who has to breathe in and breathe out all the time and has constraints of various kind, how can you ever aspire, how can you ever hope to step into my country? Therefore he says, O mortal, turn back to thy transient kind. Aspire not to accompany death to his home, as if thy breath could live where time must die. Think not thy mind-born passion strength from heaven. You see, you have great passion in the mind. Do not think it is strong enough to hold you up, to support you in my world. Think not thy mind-born passion strength from heaven. This is, you are mistaking it. Mind is mind. Mind is just a limited, it has limited potency, limited power, limited capacity. It can't help you in my world. Do not regard your mind-born passion as strength from heaven. It is not strength from heaven. Think not thy mind-born passion strength from heaven to uplift thy spirit from its earthly base. So you want to rise beyond the earth, go up, and breaking out from the material cage to upbuoy thy feet of dream in groundless knot. Where will you stand? Where? Because in my world, there won't be anything you want to support your feet. Do you think the mind will be able to provide the platform for it and bear thee through the pathless infinite? This is a path, goes to the pathless infinite. How will you ever come here? Where will you stand? What will you do in this world? And he gives ample, by way of ample caution, only in human limits man lives safe. Only in human limits man lives safe. Anything that is beyond, you should not try. But the unfortunate thing is, man cannot live within human limits. The discontent, which is the badge of being human, which has brought us up to this point, if we were contented, we would have lived forever like pigs. What's wrong with their life? They wallow in mud, they sleep, they do everything else that you and I would like to do. They eat, they breed, and they are happy. Air conditioning is automatic there, in that they look into the mirror and think they are very pretty, they think they are very intelligent, they laugh at us and we go to office, these fools are going somewhere instead of relaxing. The whole point about being human, in the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo talks about it, is this: we are plagued by this divine discontent. No matter what you give man, he is never contented. You give him birth in the Buckingham Palace, you don't know how miserable you will be before long. What we don't have looks to us very attractive. Once you have it, this is the whole thing. The reason is very simple. The reason is, the one who aspires from within is the infinite. And we want to feed the infinite with the finite. How can he be ever happy? The infinite can only be satisfied with the infinite. So when you really start looking for the infinite, when you really start experiencing the infinite, then he is happy. This finite may be all the, like if you keep at his disposal the famous store, the Harrods, it's all yours. You go and pick up whatever you want. This is still finite. The American treasure is all yours. It's still finite. So man can never be fulfilled by the finite. And so we are all the time under the illusion that only my shopping list is not yet completed. I have slightly more things, except that maybe in this shop there is not sufficient variety. Let me go to New York and do my shopping there, and you do it there, and again you find. This we go on, life after life, life after life, life after life, life after life, this goes on. But until we have had this experience, no amount of preaching from others doesn't help. It's totally useless. So all the Kathakars and Purans, all they say, oh, life is all miserable. Very often they compare the man here on this world is like a traveler in a forest, and suddenly he finds that a tiger is chasing him. So he is trying to escape from this tiger in running in darkness, and suddenly finds himself in a well. He falls into a well. And then he finds that he is going down. Somehow there is a kind of a creeper that has grown on the side of the well, and he is tangled in that creeper, and he looks up, and that branch to which he is holding, it's gradually coming off the tree. And then he finds down below there is a crocodile there, and he is standing here, and there is a beehive, and the impact of his fall, the beehive is disturbed, so all the bees are coming and trying to attack him. In that process, he suddenly finds a drop of honey falling on his tongue. In all these Kathakars, Puran, if you go and listen to them, this is what life is. And therefore they say, all this is wrong, you give this up. They go on lecturing, we go on doing what we want. Unless we have gone through all this, unless we have had this experience, no amount of sermons, etc., you can't go to kingdom vicariously. You have to walk this path yourself. And when the time comes, it is anything at all. You don't need a very learned speaker to convince you that this world doesn't take you anywhere. Like people, Amal Kiran discovered Pondicherry. When he went home with the shoes, in those days there are no Bata and so on. So he bought a new pair of shoes, it was packed in newspapers, and being a literate mind, everything in print he has to read. So he put away the shoes and started reading it. Somebody had written about Pondicherry, and the more he read, the more he got involved. So that day, it's not the shoe that he brought. He brought this passion for Pondicherry on that day along with the shoe. And he came here. This is not anything. When you are ready from within, anything comes. But to be ready from within, you have to go through this experience. And therefore, there's absolutely no point in trying to tell young people, advising them, please read the Life Divine, please read this, please read them. When it is time for them, they'll come, they'll ask you, Daddy, where is the pure copy of the Life Divine? Otherwise, they buy it, and then, it becomes like drawing room furniture. The point is, this is what life is, this is what it's always been. And this attempt to keep man within his human limits will never succeed, because this has been the human aspiration. The very first chapter of the Life Divine talks about this human aspiration. This human aspiration is always to find the divine, to find perfection that we don't have now. And those who go against this always tell us, always advise us, caution us, live within the human limit. Don't try to trespass. Don't try to go beyond it. We never pay any heed to it. Man will go on, and this evolutionary journey will go on. And this is because this is not a journey planned by any committee of the 5-year plan. This is the divine plan behind the whole thing. And so you can never stop. So man can never live safely within human limits. But the God of Death's advice is just the opposite of it. Try to live safely within human limits. Don't take, this is an adventure of consciousness. Don't be very adventurous. Take adventures, little by little. But we would like to surge ahead. That's the human nature. And all that human beings have done, all this, the today's mastery over air, what we call science, technology, if you look at all these things, they are no less an achievement than the achievements of yogis. They have also required great courage, great dedication, All this has happened in the world, and so we are benefiting from all the advances made by science and technology, medical science, etc. So human beings, whatever you do, they will keep surging ahead. But the advice against it, the advice of death is live a cautious life, live within your means, don't overspend, do this, do that. So that's represented here. Only in human limits man lives safe. Trust not in the unreal lords of time, immortal dreaming, this image of thyself, which they have built on deaths, which they have built on a dream's floating ground. Let not the dreadful goddess move thy soul to enlarge thy vehement trespass into worlds where it shall perish like a helpless thought. Do not try to extend yourself into my territory. If you trespass, then you will be annihilated. Know the limitations of hopes. Know the cold tombstones of thy hopes from life. You should know what it is reasonable to expect from life. Be satisfied with it. Don't try to overreach yourself. Armed vainly with the ideal's borrowed might, dare not to outstep man's bound and measured force. Ignorant and stumbling, in brief boundaries spent, he crowns himself the world's mock suzerain, tormenting nature with the works of mind. Sometimes man has these grandiose dreams, and he would like to crown himself the whole emperor of this world or emperor of this creation, but these are all just a fantasy. Man has a short span of time on this world. Live your life comfortably. Don't aspire too much. Don't aspire to jump too high, and you will be all right. O sleeper, dreaming of divinity. You are always dreaming of divinity. O sleeper, dreaming of divinity, wake trembling mid the indifferent silences.